I remember the first time I came and sat at this seat and I just looked out. And what you see, this kaleidoscope of shapes and colours, hard and soft textures and patterns, are just so random. Yet together, they form an image which is just perfection. It's nature's work at her finest. Well, our design with our rusted steel cladding, deep ocean blue render and symphony of Australian hardwoods will be our applause to this stunning work of art. With April bringing us to the midway point of the build, the transition from the structural phase of the development immediately shifts gear into the finishing trades, where the look of materials, colours and textures, all carefully researched by my family and I, will bring the look of the outside of the home to life. And dressing these thermocell polystyrene walls in our bushfire rated render would be our first point of order. With the renderers on site and with the art of rendering being a finely tuned technique, it was a nice change of pace for Dad and I watching as the skilled professionals took over.
The renderers look like they're doing a great job here. They're sort of going in the windows, putting some strips in, and we'll find out a little bit later on what their actual procedures are with the rendering. Anyway, that's the day. It's looking good.
These strips or metallic external angles are glued into place and provide a perfectly straight finish for our walls and openings. The base layer of this render is next embedded with the fabric mesh, which will strengthen the upper two layers to come.
First one's to really get a grip on the foam, second one to flatten it out perfect, and the third one's the finish for the colour. Get you your texture you want, your nice finish.
Not only does this rock coat render create a beautiful blue velvet finish, it also serves the purposes of creating a fire-rated skin for our home. With all homes in Australia needing to be certified to the bushfire attack level, this building regulation, specified as BAL 29 in our home, meant advanced fire-rated products like rock coat render were vital to let us achieve building regulation compliance, plus a seamless look and finish. The other material finishes for the home that must also pass this same stringent BAL fire rating requirement were our steel and timber cladding.
We've got our carpenters in, they're battening down the side of the garage, getting ready for the steel to go on.
This cladding, now back from the fabricator, would need to be lifted and screwed onto timber battens. Double checking these timber battens are perfectly straight, plus making any last minute on-site adjustments to fit each of these sheets, some weighing as much as 80 kilos, was all part of the job to wrestling this puzzle together. The other necessity was to foil insulate our lounge room walls before tightly interlocking each of our freshly oiled shiplap hardwood boards. As always, teamwork and our labouring help would be the key to working efficiently with the trades, plus helping to keep the costs down. With Dad's idea of the rusted steel cladding, my love of Scandinavian-style blonde timbers contrast against black window frames, and the glitter of a beautiful rock coat render selected by Mum, our external choices get the tick of approval.
I love it. I love the balance. The balance of the textures externally is beautiful and it's so sympathetic to the surroundings. I think to make a feature of the vaulted ceiling here.
Yep.
With this balance achieved outside, the interior design was still needing some last-minute direction to finalise the electrical schedule and plumbing rough-in.
And then over the kitchen.
Okay, so is that going to be centre of the island?
Yes.
With our interior designer Sam on site to meet with our electrician Jackson, together they mark out the precise heights and location of power points and locations of light fittings to fill in the fine detail for all of the rough-in locations.
I'm actually really glad that we're here today. So I think talking to the plumber, talking to the electrician, we identified a few things that we might want to change, and this is just part of design.
With the channels and locations all sprayed onto the walls, a complex labyrinth of wires and cables are slowly woven through the trusses and down carved channels in the polystyrene. These same channels are cut out for the plumbers, who rough into the walls their water pipes and fixtures in the exact same way. Whilst our air conditioning ducts are fed through the truss work and set up too. This air conditioning system here would later be the point of much stress and heartache, with the units for this system arriving 6 months after purchase and after repeated delivery requests to this tradesman. This individual also deliberately broke the law by illegally withholding compliance documentation for the system. The Victorian Building Authority would later get involved and order rectification works on this air conditioning, after their investigation into the case found non-compliant and defective works were installed. Many long stressful days and sleepless nights worrying about machines fully paid for yet undelivered for months on end, with also defective mechanical services installed, quickly taught me to always keep your guard up. Don't blindly trust a handshake and never pay for anything in full until it's on your doorstep, installed and properly completed. Because that's one lesson we learnt very, very painfully. With our site shed dismantled, an excavator rolls in to flatten out the yard. Plus, auger drill our stump holes for the entertaining deck. Some additional manpower was also needed to clear out the stump holes. And with close monitoring to ensure they were to correct size and depth, we get the tick of approval for the deck to finally be built. And now that rough-in is completed, the insulation and plastering can get underway. And the very start of this process begins with a laser beam shot across the ceiling.
What I'm doing now is just getting your laser line, and that's running right through the house, and that's going to give you a nice straight ceiling.
After these battens are drilled into place, we can now tuck the insulation into our ceiling. With large packs of Bradford high-performance bats rolled into the home, Mark from Bradford Insulation was also on site to lend a hand.
Well, this is pretty much the good stuff. So in the old days, we were putting, very low R value. So the higher the R value, the better the thermal performance. So we just go for high numbers all the time. So the 2.5 is the good stuff. The R5 in the ceiling, we can go to even to an R6 and an R7, but the R5 is as good as you're going to get in a ceiling these days.
And does that mean it's going to be a thicker bat, or is it going to help trap more air to keep the place warm, or what's it doing?
It's thicker. It's much thicker than we ever put in houses before. So we're really striving to get that high energy performance in a house, and it's called a star rating. So this is going to get us up to that 6-star rating that we're required to get in our houses.
with high R ratings for this insulation being the measure of thermal resistance to heat and cold. These gold bats will help us to achieve the hard-fought Energy Stars, required for all new home constructions. A sharp knife, safety gear and some family teamwork would now be needed in the week-long operation of insulating the ceiling and timber frame walls. The only pointers being to ensure the bats are a snug fit for the cavity, are never compressed or squashed, wires are pulled in front of or behind them, and spaces for power outlets and LED downlights are also cut out. With our insulation finished and with our plasterers booked in to start later in the week, supplies were fast needed on site.
So I've got a big long list if you're ready.
Yep, not a problem. Fire away.
And by working closely with our plasterers and our local trade supply store, this took the guesswork out of ordering the multitude of different plasterboards, adhesives and joining compounds.
We've got sheets, glue and fixes to hang. We've got base coat, top coat and tapes to stop it up. And we've got our beads. I think we're all set to go.
Beautiful. Tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning.
After the order is stacked, packed and ready to go, the next morning our gyprock sheets arrive on site. And with my brother Nick down from Sydney for the week to help us, we had the right amount of muscle power to get the ceiling up.
That's it, just hold that, push that up there, yeah.
And to stick these super seal sheets to the ceiling, dabs of stud adhesive are first spaced down the battens, with screw guns then drilling the sheets on. Plaster offcuts or backboards are then smothered in masonry adhesive and stuck behind the edge of the sheets to strengthen these joints.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
This ceiling, when it's finished with its straight edges, will have the same clean minimalist look which dominates the look of most modern luxurious homes this day and age. Although this wasn't always the case, with luxurious homes of yesteryear being far more intricate, ostentatious and lavish. One such home, constructed in 1862, was later to be known as La Bassa, which at the time sat on 15 acres of prime Caulfield North land and overlooked the rolling hills and countryside towards a new city called Melbourne.
Wow.
So you can see she's very impressive. She's supposed to be daunting and beautiful.
Almost Gothic-y looking.
Yeah, it is. It's that real French, late 19th century interpretation of the French Second Empire style. So it's supposed to be, impressive and big, to make you sort of go, wow.
Everything about this French Renaissance-inspired mansion was designed to be a grand statement of wealth and status for its rich and influential owners. Like its third owner, John Watson, who purchased the property in 1904 with wealth that flowed from the Victorian gold rush.
Again, it's really indicative of that very opulent and luxurious feeling. Everything about this room screams wealth, with even the wallpapers designed to look like leather and the gold gilt. It's just everything is designed just to be beautiful.
In fact, it's this level of attention paid not only to the ornamental finish of wallpapers, carvings, handles and lighting, but also to the architraves, frescoes and ceilings that serve as a constant reminder to the level of craftsmanship and wealth required to construct this grand old dame.
The ceiling is just magnificent.
Yeah, the ceiling was discovered after the National Trust purchased it and came in to do some restorative work. There was a false ceiling up, and when they pulled it down they could see this beautiful, what they call a trompe-l'oeil ceiling, and it's designed to look like there is no ceiling and it's just going to look right out into the clouds and the sky. The Victorian period was very much about gardens and exotic plants and things like that, and this is sort of a way of bringing it inside.
And it's this love of preservation and restoration that make the not-for-profit National Trust organisation and their volunteers work so tirelessly as proud guardians, protecting and restoring old buildings like these.
I was going to say, you've obviously got a great passion for this. So you talk about it like it's yours almost.
Yeah, I do. I feel a very strong emotional connection with a lot of the houses that we look after. You can't help but get attached. They're beautiful and they have fascinating histories, and you know, to be a part of its conservation and its story, that I find just really significant. I love that.
And it's the tale of its stories that are endless. From each of its 4 major owners to the fashionistas, actors, musicians and film stars, and around 700 tenants who also called this place home when it served as apartments too. All of whom were surrounded by a building that casts an overwhelming impression on you.
Everything just feels really big.
Yeah, and that's just exactly what they wanted you to think. They wanted you to think that time and money had been spent, and they had the time and money to do that.
So they were essentially using materials and height and width and almost the same types of themes we use today in our home to create the feeling of luxury.
That's exactly right.
Although I think we pare it back a little bit more.
Just, it's not quite as extravagant, I think.
Labassa also reminds you that the personality of any home is made from a design aesthetic that is delicately balanced with its functionality, all carefully married with selected pieces that enlighten its soul.
Love this window.
Beautiful tripartite window. It's gorgeous. Ferguson and Urey designed when they were prominent stained glass window designers in the late 1800s. It's designed to represent the 4 seasons, so each round window has a particular association with a season.
I was going to say, there's so much light in this space as well. I think it's got a dual purpose.
That's exactly right, otherwise it would be terrible. I mean, it's dark in here anyway, but it does, dark, it lets the most amount of light in.
It's thanks to those with the foresight to protect this magnificent old building, to those who guard it now, and to the everyday people that help fund its never-ending restoration, that architecture like this lives to speak on to the future generations. Because it's buildings like Labassa and its stories that help us make sense of Australia's history and place in the world, and define our present moment in time, and the legacies that we choose to create. The most impressive complement to 3-metre high ceilings is 3-metre high doors. And with our doors needing to be hung just after the ceiling was finished, and just prior to the walls being gyprock plastered, meant it was time to fix the door jambs. With MDF being core drilled to the concrete in these walls, the slow process to hanging each of these big, heavy, awkward doors had begun. This very fiddly process of hanging, levelling and perfectly balancing each of these oversized doors would take a week in total for a carpenter. They'd later be dismantled and painted before being re-hung for the final time. With the plasterers back to mix up the masonry adhesive that will directly stick these sheets to our polystyrene walls, plastering back in the old days wasn't quite this easy.
Typically what's known as solid plastering, so they pretty much render straight over structure, let's say, but we obviously brought, gyprock obviously brought in the paper-faced plasterboard, which is obviously a lot... From
overseas?
From, yeah, the technology overseas, so they've obviously brought it over here and introduced it to the Australian market. It's been a huge success because it's so easy to put up.
With gyprock pioneering plasterboard sheets in Australia back in 1947, it's innovations like these that have helped revolutionise the building industry. Another big innovation of late are these robotic-like stilts, which make the skilled job of finishing the plaster easy for the professionals, who begin the process by hiding the joins with a 3-part jointing system. A roll of paper tape is applied with a base coat compound to strengthen these joints. And once dry, the second base coat is box troweled on, before the third coat, being a smooth and creamy gyprock top coat, is applied. This same 3-coat process is applied to every screw hole in the home, whilst beading is cut and attached to the window reveals to complete the look. These external angles are also applied to the corners of walls and bulkheads to complete our square set edges. Similarly, internal angles are run through a box of topping compound before being stuck into the corners too. After a combined 3 weeks of plastering, the crucial job of sanding was the last leg of the process. With the machine sander and elbow grease, all the joins, screw holes, window reveals and angles are sanded to perfection to give us the blank canvas to start painting the home. And just like that, the home was now plastered.
It's funny how the minute that plaster goes on the wall of a house, it really starts to feel like a home. And I guess that's because it's one of those things that you live with in your everyday life. What a journey it's been to get to this point right here, and we still have a way to go. Next on our list, we're polishing our concrete floor, which looks a little bit worse for wear now, but it's going to be part of our masterpiece. See you later.
Next week, our concrete floor is honed and polished to perfection. Dad and I paint the inside of the home. And we install our cabinetry and European oak floor.